Thank you very much for that presentation, Ambassador. I'd like to thank the government of Chile for hosting this meeting and thank the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People for holding this meeting, and thank also the translators for their wonderful job in making this possible. La última vez que hablé en castellano, causé problemas con
The last time I spoke in Spanish, I caused problems for the interpreters with my Portuñol, so I will be speaking in English.
Colleagues, academics, civil society. What has taken place in Palestinian territories is the rapid unfolding of historical process that has been in place for a long time. A nation expanding its borders at the expense of the native people. Occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing have developed into a horrific genocide perpetrated by Israel, with the active collaboration of the United States and its allies, and the complicity of each and every state that continued to engage with Israel even while it committed the most atrocious crimes, visible and known to all of us through citizen journalism, but also because the perpetrator has made no efforts to conceal its crimes. Since the failure of the Oslo process, the Gaza Strip has been viewed and treated internationally as an exception, a small territory at the margins of what was left of Palestine. In fact, Gaza has been the laboratory and the paradigm indicating the vision that Israel has for the region and the direction in which Palestine is heading. The 20-point plan for Gaza, presented by Trump, together with a ceasefire which is violated on a daily basis, reenacts old mandate system style formulas for imposing neocolonialism and fostering divisions in the local population, completely excluded from any political agency. Furthermore, as stated by Richard Falk, the Gaza experience, additional to its unspeakable concreteness as well as its prolonged character and multidimensional criminality, can also be usefully interpreted as a metaphor for the exposure of vulnerable peoples everywhere to the dangerous and self-destructive systemic features of the 21st century world order. The failure to bring safety and a future to the Palestinian people may indicate that we are on the brink of a new era where the elimination of vulnerable peoples and populations in enemy countries becomes the accepted norm, and means by which predatory nations, with their own capitalist crisis and greed for new lands, enrichment, exploitation of natural resources, and geopolitical arrangements that follow. As indicated back in 2008 by the late Uruguayan author Eduardo Galeano, we should ask ourselves who gave Israel the right to deny all rights. We should also ask ourselves that which has been the most pressing question for the past 2 years: who will stop Israel and make it comply with international law? The participation and responsibilities of so many Western nations in this genocide need not be repeated. They have been thoroughly investigated and pointed out by the Gaza Tribunal, the Special Rapporteur, and states, and have been stated exhaustively by independent Palestinian intellectuals. What we do need is to investigate the actions of those states which have not been mentioned in the Special Rapporteur's latest report and that are not considered partners in this genocide, but have also not completely abided by their international obligations. These are mainly members of the Global South, a non-homogeneous bloc whose main aspect is its potential counter-hegemonic character. First, very early on, most of these countries recognize that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. Second, as in the North, in the Global South, there are important chasms between government and public opinion, but they do not always play in the same way because we are speaking of divided countries and divided public opinion. Civil society in Latin America, as in Europe and the US, has made huge advances in terms of recognizing, condemning Israeli occupation, apartheid, and genocide. But it has also, and it is also disputed with large, for example, evangelical, I don't want to generalize, but which has a very important pro-Israeli sector. In Brazil, for example, 20% of the population supports far-right pro-Zionist parties. 26.9% of the population is evangelical and therefore tends to support Zionism. As in the North, the elites that control large corporations, the media, foundations, and universities, they have not changed. They continue to support Israel. This means that even though there has been the largest ever public opinion shift pressuring for change, the more progressive Latin American countries, for them to enact they still have to counter what is frequently conservative legislative bodies, conservative elites, and large constituencies of far-right and evangelical voters and members of civil society. Even for progressive governments to act in our region, we need, and they need, both backing and pressure, in other words, to act together with organized civil society. In Brazil specifically, civil society and governments have implemented measures that have gone beyond European countries, but they're clearly not enough, not only from a moral perspective, but also from that of international law and third-party states' erga omnes obligations. At the government level, Brazil has been suspended the purchase of 36 Elbit howitzers, intervened since 2025 in South Africa's case at the ICJ this year, therefore, and Brazil has downgraded diplomatic relations with Israel since 2024 and left the IHRA in 2025, where it was an observing member. Other South American and Central American countries, Bolivia, Colombia, Belize, have completely severed their diplomatic ties to Israel, while Chile, Honduras, Ecuador have called back their ambassadors for consultations. And a few other very well-known important acts of economic boycotts have been imposed, and I will not repeat them here. However, Brazil has failed to comply with other obligations, and I'm taking the example of Brazil where I come from, but we could do this and have this analysis in each and every of our countries. Other obligations violate, in face of violations of Israel. First, to take the first example, very importantly, it has not canceled oil sales, in spite of demands from workers' unions, from the Federação Nacional and Federação Única dos Petroleiros, the oil workers' unions, these sales amount to 3.3% of Israel crude oil consumption in 2024, according to Comexstat, a website, an official website. It has not exited from the Mercosur Free Trade Agreement, in spite of the fact that this agreement violates its own settlement exclusion clause. And it could still cancel bilateral trade involving technological, military, and dual-use artifacts. And also collaborate with initiatives that exist to prosecute war criminals in Brazilian countries, and they are very difficult to be conducted by civil society, given a series of formal difficulties inside the judicial process. Now, could Latin American countries, with this small example that I gave, given the lack of time, could they agree on coordinated actions such as military embargo, cancellation of FTAs, and the prosecution of war criminals who come to the region? Latin America accounts for 33 of the approximately 125 countries considered as part of the Global South. That is 25%. And 70% of Latin American countries are governed today by center to left-wing progressive governments, which means that there is some chance for this concerted action to happen. And to fully meet their obligations, setting therefore a new precedent, a new direction for humanity. We may be at a crucial moment for humanity, as many foresee, but the nature of the new era unfolding is disputed, and a concerted action to protect and heal Gaza and to demand immediate Palestinian self-determination may represent the difference that is needed. If it is true that the world has reached a tipping point, it is up to the Global South to assert that either international law, a European project in its origin, and social justice be valid and applicable to all, or it will not be there for any of us. Thank you.